Final Fantasy VII is one of the best JRPGs I have ever played in my life. It is constantly fighting for the #1 spot in my top JRPGs with Persona 4 and 5. It is a game that is very special to me. Anytime I play it, even just for a little bit, I get a huge rush of nostalgia. And it's even better when nostalgia is surrounded by everything awesome. The battle system, customization, characters, the world, and oh my goodness, the soundtrack! The battle theme in Final Fantasy VII is one of my favorite battle themes in a JRPG, hands down. Obviously, I hold Final Fantasy VII in a very high regard. It's with all that in mind that I am worried about this remake somewhat. Now, every time I see more of the remake, I am impressed. I like everything I see. The new character models look great. Cloud, Barret, Aerith, and Tifa all look glorious. And yes, even if you don't like what they did with Tifa, I think she looks just right for this remake. The battle system looks like a whole mess of fun. Call it maybe a more grounded, enhanced version of Final Fantasy 15's. And since I did mention the battle system, yes, at first I was a little bit disappointed that the game was not turn-based like the original was, but I understand why they did it, and I'm not opposed to an action-based RPG. They are including a classic mode for those that are completely against the action-based nature of the game, so you can go back and play it how it originally was, kinda, but I have my skepticism about that mode because they tried to do something similar in Final Fantasy 15, but I didn't care for how it was executed there. Simply put, the more I see on Final Fantasy VII Remake, the more excited I get. And with the most recent trailer of the game, my hype levels and hype frequency, if you will, aligns perfectly with the Resident Evil 2 remake before it was released. Resident Evil 2, before its remake dropped, was one of my favorite games of all time. I grew up with that game and played it so many times. I eventually knew that game better than I knew myself, probably. The police station, the sewers, the lab, I loved that game. From the day it was released in 1998 up until the remake that dropped in 2019, I literally, at the bare minimum, played that game throughout the years, at least 100 times. And then when I played the remake, I was hooked all over again. And not just because of nostalgia, but of the simple fact that this is how a f***ing remake is supposed to be made. You can tell all the love and consideration for longtime fans such as myself that went into this game when creating it. It does everything bigger and better, and it expands on things that the developers simply couldn't do back in the day because of hardware limitations. It even added some things that just makes sense, and it just looks great. It looks amazing. It's an 8-hour game and I almost have 70 hours in it according to Steam. Let me not focus too much on Resident Evil 2. The point is that just like Resident Evil 2, I know and care about Final Fantasy VII just as much. Now, I may not know every nook and cranny of Final Fantasy VII, but I do know one portion of Final Fantasy VII really well, and that's Midgar. I spent a lot of time in Midgar as a kid, mostly because I was an idiot and had no idea how to progress the story, so I was constantly searching around that section of the game for the longest time. Go ahead and feel free to laugh at me when I was a kid. The thing is, I have been burned by Square Enix in the past, and it all started with Final Fantasy XIII. Final Fantasy XIII was disappointing to me. At the time when Final Fantasy XIII dropped in NA, it was supposed to be the JRPG that got the genre back into the good graces of the general gamer, and people who pretty much brushed JRPGs to the side. This game wasn't the breakout hit I thought it was going to be, in my opinion. It spent years in development. Over the years before it was released, we barely got any information on the game, and then when it finally released, it was met with a lukewarm reception by the fans, just to put it lightly, although it still earned high marks by game journalists. And don't get me wrong, there are people who love Final Fantasy XIII. It's just for me personally, it wasn't the Final Fantasy game I was expecting. And to be honest, nowadays I want to play it over again just to see if it was as bad as I personally thought it was. And then there was Final Fantasy 15. Jesus H. Christ, Final Fantasy 15. Now granted, right now, as of 2019, Final Fantasy 15 is a good game from a technical standpoint. It looks good, it plays rather well, however, that was not the case upon its initial release in 2016. Now listen people, there are very few games that can genuinely make me angry. I'm talking about the type of anger you get when playing a game online and you're not doing that great, or the game is lagging, or the opposition is using cheat tactics, or just as simple as you running over a save file you meant to keep in a JRPG. Ninja Gaiden for me was one of those games that got me to that state to the point where I broke my controller in anger. And there was one other game that got me to that state, and it's none other than Final Fantasy 15. I mean, I didn't break a controller, but you know, still the same feelings. Now let me say this. This was at the time in 2016 when Final Fantasy 15 was a mess of a game in my opinion. Nowadays, it runs smooth, especially if you're on PC. The game has been updated numerous times to improve the gameplay. It added story bits, for free I believe, and pretty much added a bunch of content to the game to make it better. But again, as it was in 2016, it was a mess. The frame rate was a little jittery. The gameplay wasn't smooth. The story had so many plot points that was left unanswered for DLC. And if you played the Xbox One version, you got the short end of the stick from a performance and graphical standpoint. I know this from experience and literally had to give the game back to GameStop and tell them I needed the PS4 version. Luckily, I had a connection at GameStop that allowed me to exchange versions of the game. Even then, the game wasn't all that put together. Even after all the years it spent in the oven, you can tell there was numerous troubles with development. The developers couldn't decide on a clear-cut vision of the game, and that the game needed another delay to flesh things out. But the game was baking for years upon years and they didn't want to delay it any further. Again, I can't stress enough how this was at the time of its initial release. Please don't tell me the game's a lot better currently. I know it is, I played it for some time on PC, but that doesn't mean I forgot how it was out the gate on consoles. And even if it was all just technical mishaps that the game had back in 2016, the story was terrible in my opinion. And upon getting to chapter 13, the game had completely and utterly derailed, and as I was playing, I was getting angry towards the end that this was the game that I had been waiting for since 2007. You know, maybe with this Final Fantasy VII Remake, I should be more optimistic. Maybe, just maybe, Final Fantasy 15 had to be the catalyst for Square Enix to get things right with this one. Maybe we will look back at Final Fantasy 15 as a game that was sort of an experiment, combat-wise at least, for the Final Fantasy VII Remake. Maybe they actually learned from their mistakes. Or maybe I should be the one to learn from my mistakes of trusting this company when they have literally scarred me twice. 3 times if you count Parasite Eve, the 3rd birthday. Actually 4 times if you count Kingdom Hearts 3. And it's not like they have a lot on their plate when it comes to this remake. They are separating Final Fantasy VII into parts now, this being Midgar, so the scope has been lessened and they can focus on little things and not have to worry about an open world, for example, like they did with Final Fantasy 15. At least, not yet. I really want this game to knock it out of the park. I really want this game to be as amazing as the Resident Evil 2 remake was for me. And I just gotta ask myself and ask you guys, should I be worried about the Final Fantasy VII Remake? Jeez, I sound like a person in an abusive relationship that just keeps coming back to their abuser. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you guys are utterly hyped for Final Fantasy VII Remake. Let me know if you guys think I should be worried and I shouldn't be getting my hopes up. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button. Subscribe to me if you are new to the channel. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Instagram. Join my Discord server. All the links are in the description. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time in the near future. Peace.